Hello, and welcome to the latest installment of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, reading my writing to help entertain you during this nightmare that we seem to be stuck in. I'd like to apologize for missing last week. Between DragonCon and deadlines, it was just not possible to get this, to get one up during the Tuesday after Labor Day. But we're back now, and to keep the one novella per month theme going, I'm just going to be doing my next one, Security, over the course of the next 3 weeks. So we'll be done by the end of September, and then moving on to episode 100, believe it or not, which will cover Many Splendors, which was my final contribution to the STARFLEET Corps of Engineers. My penultimate contribution is Security. There's actually quite a long gap between Breakdowns and Security. Breakdowns was the 28th ebook in the series. Security was number 54, and in the interim, a bunch of things happened. As indicated at the end of Breakdowns, several new crew members reported to the refurbished Vinci, including a new second officer to replace Duffy, named Morglash Tev, a Tellarite, and one who has a bit of an arrogance problem, to say the least. He is a brilliant engineer, but also doesn't really get along with anybody. Stuff happens with Tev. He mistakes Gomez's hesitancy in the first mission together, which is due to her still mourning Duffy, for incompetence, and so it leads to him being kind of insubordinate on more than one occasion. There's also we also find out some bits about his background in well, the thing I just mentioned happened in Aftermath by Christopher L. Bennett. There's also we find out some of his background in a story called Ring Around the Sky by Alan Gibson. And then there was also a couple of the characters started a relationship. Vance Hawkins, who is now the Deputy Chief of Security, and Abramowitz, the cultural specialist, start up a relationship after Failsafe by David Mack. And what else? Like I said, a lot of things happened. There was a team up with Deep Space Nine involving Empok Nor, the sister station. That was in Lost Time by Ilsa J. Bick, where they crossed over into a parallel universe. And the one after this is a story that involves Bashir and Lense. In Lost Time, Bashir and Lense go off to Station Kel Artis to attend a medical conference where a prize will be given. Something happens to them, which we'll find out which over the course of this, and then where they were will be determined in wounds also by Ilsa J. Bick. The more immediately to this, the one before this was called Fables of the Prime Directive by Corey Rushton, and in that one, the away team went on a mission to a pre-warp planet that was contaminated, that was conquered by the Dominion during the war. We'll see the aftermath of that in here. And I'm trying to think what else is referenced, but I think I got most of it. The main object behind writing Security, besides focusing on Corsi and her security detail, was to deal with a couple of issues. One was the ongoing insubordination issue with Tev and Gomez. One is to sort of tie everything together with Lense disappearing and so on. There was also an ongoing plot that goes back to Cold Fusion. You might recall in that one that Corsi seduced Stevens, and because it was the anniversary of something that happened with a guy named Dar. That was all we knew about it. I invited any author who wanted to pitch something to finally resolve that to do it. Nobody did. So finally I decided to do it myself, which is also part of the plot of Security as well. So I finally explained not only why Corsi seduced Stevens that night, but also why way back in the first Corps of Engineers story, which was Belly of the Beast by Dean Wesley Smith, it was established that Lieutenant Christine Vale, who is the security chief of the USS Enterprise E, said she owes her career to Corsi, and we don't know why. That's also explained in this storyline. We have a bunch of new characters who joined the crew after Wildfire and Breakdowns. One of whom I have to give a little intro to just because he's hilarious. Lauren Coleman and Randall Bills in their story, The Demon, did introduce a character named Mac Vince, who is from Sigma Iosha, which, if you recall the original series episode, A Piece of the Action, the Ioshians had patterned themselves after a book that was left behind by an Earth ship called Chicago Gangs in the 20s, and they then pattern their entire life after basically Al Capone and criminals of the 20s in Chicago. So so Mac has a very entertaining style of speaking. Anyway, without further ado, here is Security by Keith R.A. DeCandido, Part 1. Chapter 1. USS Da Vinci in transit between Recreation Station Hidalgo and Coroticus 3, 1 week ago. The crystalline walls sparkled with reflected light as the brown ball shot out arcs of electricity at the 9 Starfleet personnel in EVA suits. A bizarre structure had entered the Artemis system, and the USS Da Vinci had been sent to investigate this unknown technology. While doing so, they found a known one, the brown ball, an Andrassi security device. One of the Starfleet people, a Tellarite officer, broke cover and headed for one of the faceted wall sections that looked like a series of sparkling icicles. Another bellowed, "Tev, what the hell are you doing?" 2 seconds after Lieutenant Commander Tev broke cover, another followed him, this an enlisted security guard armed with a phaser rifle, which he shot at the brown ball. "Computer freeze program." At the command from Lieutenant Commander Domenica Corsi, the tableau stopped moving. Andrew Angelopoulos sighed. "Here it comes." "All right," the security chief said to the people under her command, gathered in the Da Vinci's hololab for a debrief. "Who can tell me what Angelopoulos did wrong there?" Around him, 6 other enlisted guards raised their hands. Angelopoulos put his head in his. Standing before them, Corsi, flanked by her deputy, Chief Vance Hawkins, smiled. "Angelopoulos, do you know what you did wrong?" Venturing a smile, he said, "Yes, ma'am. I shouldn't have bothered wasting my breath and energy defending a stupid officer who doesn't know not to break cover." Several chuckles started to form, then died when Corsi's facial expression managed, somehow, to get darker. "Most officers, particularly engineers, a type of officer we are overburdened with on this ship, are too stupid to know when not to break cover. That's why we're here. Now, when Hawkins beamed down with you, Robbins, Lawak, Crotein, and Tamandra to support Tev, Stevens, and Conlon, you each had a task. Hawkins was in charge, Lawak and Tamandra were to secure the perimeter, and what were the rest of you supposed to do, Robbins?" Angelopoulos had opened his mouth to answer, but Corsi had instead posed the question to Madeline Robbins. She had been in security on the Da Vinci since the ship was first given over to the S.C.E. 6 years ago. She even predated core breach. The older woman said, "We were to process the engineers, ma'am. I had Stevens, Crotein, had Conlon, and Angelopoulos had Tev." "Right. Crotein, what does protecting the engineers mean, exactly?" The wiry Boslik woman gave Angelopoulos an apologetic look before saying, "Stick by the engineers at all times, no matter what." "No matter what." "Yes." Corsi paced back and forth in the hololab. Angelopoulos wished they would get past this and move on to their assignments for the upcoming mission. From what Angelopoulos had heard from Bennett and Phelps in engineering, they were splitting into 3 groups. Before that, though, Corsi was taking the opportunity to pick apart their mission to Artemis 9, undertaken before their unexpected rescue of Commander Gomez from Rec Station Hidalgo. Finally, Corsi turned her pitiless blue eyes on Angelopoulos, who, for his part, was trying desperately to sink into the bench. Next to him, Mac Vince was doing a terrible job of holding in one of his trademark guffaws. "Angelopoulos," she said in a slow voice, "does no matter what include following officers when they break cover to start playing with their crystals." "Yes, ma'am." "You didn't do that." "Well, no, ma'am. Honestly, I wasn't expecting it." "Congratulations. That's the second wrong answer you've given in 5 minutes. People, we're security. Our job is to expect the unexpected and to keep the people on this ship safe. You, Angelopoulos, failed in that regard pretty spectacularly on Artemis. Most of you came on after Galvin 6, and that's because 7 good people died protecting this ship. If you can't handle that, then you can follow Powers out the door. Understood?" As one, all 9 security personnel, even Hawkins, said, "Yes, ma'am." Angelopoulos bit his lip in annoyance. Back on Risa, Hawkins had asked Angelopoulos what he thought of Corsi, and he described her then as brusque. After that dressing down, brusque would be a relief. He also thought that her shot at Frank Powers was unjustified. True, Powers had complained that he signed on to the Da Vinci because he figured protecting engineers would be comparatively easy duty, only to find the ship diving into a black hole within a few weeks of his signing on. Then he was badly injured on Fantas 61, and when Powers recovered from that, he requested a transfer. That doesn't make him bad security, it just makes him... Angelopoulos didn't finish the thought. He also noticed that while Corsi mentioned Powers and the people who died at Galvin's 6th, she didn't mention Ken Caetano. He died not from protecting the ship or doing his duty, but from some secret weapon created by a crazy Vorta, one that also claimed his roommate, Ted Deverick, one of the engineers. Corsi had taken those two murders particularly hard for some reason, and Angelopoulos wondered what if that meant she was going to get even harder on them. Like it could get worse. Alright, we're en route to Coroticus 3. We should be there in 3 hours. It's one of 2 pre-war planets that the Dominion occupied during the war, the other being Sachem 2. We're going to help set up the observation post back up, and also to examine cultural contamination the Dominion might have engaged in on both worlds. Prime Directive's in full force on this one, and there'll be lots of engineers, including a bunch we picked up at Hidalgo. So the away teams will include 4 security per. Chief Hawkins will have Angelopoulos, Protein, and Konya on Sachem. I'll be taking Tamandra, Vince, and Lawak to Coroticus. Thank God. Angelopoulos let out a long breath. I thought for sure she'd stick me on her team. At least Hawk doesn't want to kill me. Probably. After that, the Da Vinci will be headed to Avril Station for an upgrade. Robbins, you'll be it for security, but Commander Ling told me that 6 of her people will be detached to you to handle security for Commander Gomez and her team. Robbins simply nodded. Powers' replacement will be reporting to the ship at Avril, also, as will Deverick's, and the USS Musashi is supposed to be dropping Lense off. Apparently their CMO is up for the same prize. Robbins, I expect you to break the new guy in. Yes, ma'am. Even though he knew full well that the best thing for him would be to keep his mouth shut, Angelopoulos found himself saying, ma'am, don't you mean Caetano's replacement? Now Corsi glared at him, and Angelopoulos was trying to bury himself under the bench. Of all the people in this room who should be keeping their mouths shut, Angelopoulos, you're pretty much at the top of the list. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. And I said Caetano's replacement. Angelopoulos wisely said nothing. Hawkins was giving Corsi a strange look. She really did say Powers' replacement, and that meant that something was wrong. But no way was Angelopoulos going to pursue it just at the moment. All right. Corsi looked out at everyone. Dismissed. Stepping over Vince and Tamandra, Angelopoulos set a land speed record getting out of the HoloLab. He wanted to be as away from Corsi as fast as possible. He'd been in security for a little more than 3 years, going back to just before the war, and one truth he'd learned was that if you were in your CO's doghouse, avoid said CO like the plague. On his way down the corridor, he almost literally bumped into Lieutenant Commander Tev. Sorry, sir. Guard, the Tellarite said dismissively and started to walk past him. Sir? Tev turned around and asked impatiently, Yes? I just wanted to apologize to you, sir. I was unaware of any offense you committed. If you had, I'm quite sure I would have reported you for it. This is a bad idea, Angelopoulos told himself, but as with his pointing out Corsi's misstatement, he found the words coming out of his mouth before his brain could stop them. Back on Artemis, sir, you broke cover, and I was slow to watch your flank. I didn't anticipate your move and lagged behind, so... Well, of course you didn't anticipate my move! Tev snorted, which sounded like a pipe bursting. You couldn't possibly have worked out how to use the crystalline power systems to overload the Andrasi security device, as I did. You're simply a security guard. Few on this ship could have anticipated what I would do, and none of them is in security. Therefore, guard, you have nothing for which to apologize. Tev continued down the corridor. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a most onerous duty to perform. Well, that didn't make me feel any better. As Tev continued toward the HoloLab, Vince walked up beside Angelopoulos. When are you going to learn to keep your yap shut, Andy? At this rate, 5 minutes after I'm dead. Which will be 5 minutes from now if you get too close to the boss. The Ioshan shook his head. Come on, I'll buy you a beer. We got 3 hours and we ain't on shift till then. See if we can rustle up some grub, too. Angelopoulos nodded. Sounds good. Hey, Mac, what do you think's up with Core Breach? Nothing's up, Andy. Just because she raked you over the coals don't mean nothing. He waved his hand in front of his face. No, not that. I deserve to get my F-shields blown off for that one. No, I mean the way she called the new guy Powers' replacement instead of Caetano's. What do you think that is? Vink shrugged as they approached the turbo lift that would take them to the mess hall. I heard tell she was buds with Caetano's old man, so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know, I ain't no head shrinker. Besides, Dane's tired. After Artemis, we all are. I'm looking forward to a nice, easy mission on Coroticus, let me tell you. Yeah. They entered the turbo lift. Hey, what's Tev talking about the HoloLab being an onerous duty?
Thought those engineers loved it in there, playing with their techie toys and stuff. Vince leaned in close. Well, between you, me, and the lamppost, I heard tell that Gomez got Tev taking some kind of sensitivity training. Angelopoulos blinked. You're kidding. That's what I heard. Anyhow, if any mook needs it, it's him. You said it, brother. Angelopoulos winced. He liked Vince, he really did, but there were times when his odd way of talking, common to the natives of Sigma Iosha, who had apparently patterned their entire society after a 400-year-old Earth book about contemporary criminals, rubbed off on him. If I find myself calling Corsi sweetheart, I'm going to kill him. Chapter 2. USS Da Vinci in orbit around Avril Station 2 days ago. David Gold exited the turbolift. He had been on his way to his quarters to reread the letter from his granddaughter, Ruth. Little Rinnick David was adjusting to having a baby sister. The baby was doing fine, and they had finally decided to name her Kiri, after Ruth's husband's Rinnick's grandmother. However, before Gold could even make it to his cabin in order to peruse the letter yet again, he was summoned back to the bridge by a call from the Musashi, which he hoped was bringing his chief medical officer back to him. He wasn't sure, as the Musashi had to fly through a massive ion storm in order to get here from Station Kel Artis, where the Benton Prize has been awarded. Lense had been one of the finalists for the prestigious medical award. So had Dr. Julian Bashir of Deep Space Nine, and they had traveled together in one of DS9's runabouts. The Musashi, however, had a finalist to pick up in their own chief medical officer, and was then going to Corcoroli 9. Avril Station was on the way between Kel Artis and Corcoroli, so it worked out nicely for everyone. The replacements for Caetano and Deverick, a young man named Tomozuka Kim and an older woman named Lisa Iristorza, respectively, had reported aboard, and the upgrades to Avril were proceeding apace, despite occasional shouting matches between Gomez and Tev. As he entered the bridge, Gold thought again with sadness about the senseless deaths of Caetano and Deverick. He'd been a captain for a lot of years on a lot of ships, the Da Vinci for more than 6 of them, and it never stopped hurting when he lost people under his command. Gamma Shift was on duty. Martina Barr at Con, Alexander Lambden at Ops, and Win Mara at Tactical. The latter, a tall Bajoran woman, spoke as he sat in his chair. I have Captain Terrapane, sir. Good. On screen. A very concerned-looking face appeared on the viewer, along with a 40-ish balding man with a blue collar on his uniform. I'm afraid I have some bad news, Captain. Your doctors weren't at the conference. Gold blinked. Say again? The man in the blue collar spoke up. Captain, I'm Dr. Dennis Chamelis. I'm Chief Medical Officer of the Musashi. I'm afraid that neither Elizabeth nor Julian made it to the conference. As it happens, they didn't win. I did, in fact. But the point is, having no interest in the doctor's point, Gold waved his right hand in front of his face. What happened to my CMO, Doctor? Honestly, I have no idea. Gold whirled around to the tactical station behind him. Put a call through to DS9, pronto. Wynn nodded. Aye, sir. I'm sorry, if it wasn't for the ion storm, Terrapane started. Understandable, Captain. Don't worry, we'll get right on it. We need to make time to Corcoroli 9. Again, sorry about this. It's all right. Da Vinci out. As soon as the screen reverted to the view of Avril Station, Wynn said, I've got Deep Space Nine, sir. Gold nodded, and the screen switched, this time to a very familiar Bajoran woman in a Starfleet uniform with a red collar and 4 pips. With a wry smile, she said, David, this is getting to be a habit. Not a good one, I'm afraid, Nerys, Gold said to Captain Kira in as serious a voice as he could muster. It seems we've both got us a problem. Chapter 3. USS Da Vinci in orbit of Herodicus 3 now. Vance Hawkins waited impatiently for Laura Pointer to hurry up and finish operating the transporter. I need to see my woman, not to mention my CO. Their mission to Sachem 2 had been uneventful. The Dominion had done little to change the lives of the natives, mostly because the natives were fairly easygoing people. P-8 Blue had supervised the team of engineers who'd be running the duck blind. Vance and his people had found no remnants of a Dominion base that might prove problematic. Whatever one might say about the Jem'Hadar, they were good at cleaning up after themselves. And Bart Falwell had found no evidence of cultural contamination. The linguist had also complained that the natives, who called themselves the Omor, had the most boring language he'd ever encountered. Vance gamely tried to be sympathetic. Now they had to pick up Commander Corsi and her team from Herodicus, which included Carol Abramowitz. Vance and Carol had been serving on the Da Vinci together since the war. But it wasn't until their mission to Teneb, during which the entire away team, including the 2 of them, Fabian Stevens and Commander Gomez, was almost killed, that they really noticed each other. He enjoyed listening to her talk, her sense of humor, her interest in the nuances of how other people live their lives, and he could even stand to listen to her music for more than 5 minutes at a time, which put him one up on their 2-score crewmates. As Pointer energized the transporter, Vance felt his stomach drop. There had been no vocal communication with the away team to avoid possible Prime Directive issues. They'd simply sent a signal to Corsi's comm badge indicating that the Da Vinci was approaching. So Vance had no idea how the commission went. But the lack of any kind of distress signal from the duck blind on the planet was, he had hoped, a good sign. When he saw one of the 6 members of the team beaming up in a horizontal position, he feared the worst. Damn it, we just buried Ken and that Deverett kid, and Lense has gone missing. We're not losing another one. I'm not losing Carol. To Vance's relief, the injured crew member wasn't Carol, but Lawak's son, and Vance soon saw that he was breathing. That tough little Bajoran had been through hell and back during the war, and Vance was fairly sure that if he was breathing, he'd be fine. Corsi, like all of them, dressed in the brightly colored clothing and cloak that the Kurotikans favored, barked at Pointer. "Get Lawak to sickbay!" She tapped her comm badge. "Corsi to Lense. Doctor, you've got a patient." "Lense isn't back yet," Vance said quickly. Before he could answer the question that Corsi's responding look posed, he tapped his own comm badge. "Hawkins to Wetzel. Incoming wounded." Even as he spoke, he felt the subtle change in vibration indicating that they were going to warp speed. Lawak's body disappeared in a shimmer of light. "Acknowledged," came Nurse Sandy Wetzel's voice. "He's just materialized. I'll get the EMH on it." "What happened to Sohn?" Vance asked. "What happened to Lense?" Corsi asked right back. "And why did we go to warp so fast?" Since he was the chief petty officer and she was the lieutenant commander, her questions got answered first. The Missouri apparently never made it to Kelardis. Nobody's heard from Lense or Bashir since they left DS9 right before that Empok Nor disasters. The Defiant's already searching, and we're heading out to do the same now that we've got you guys. Shaking her head, Corsi said, "Damn it. Captain wants you and Stevens in a staff meeting as soon as you get changed and, bob your ears." Kurotikans had tapered ears, so all of the away team, save for Tamandra, whose Vulcan physiology gave her adequate natural cover, had their ears surgically altered to pass muster. "Screw the ears." She turned to the others. "Fabe, you're with me. The rest of you report to sickbay. The EMH can deal with you guys after he fixes up Lawak. Then report to the security office. The minute my senior staff meeting's over, I'll be briefing you all." "You'll want to meet the new guy, too," Dan said. "Tomozuka Kim. Robbins has been showing him the ropes." Corsi nodded. "Good." With that, she and Stevens left. Vince and Tamandra followed behind her. After he gave Pointer a significant look, she said, I think I need to go recalibrate something. Be back in a bit." The second the door closed behind Pointer's retreating form, Vance leaned down and kissed Carol passionately. It had been a week, after all. When he came up for air several subjective centuries later, he smiled down at her, their arms still clasped around each other. "You taste kind of peaty." She smiled. "That would be when the crazy Vorta dropped me to the ground." Vance's eyes widened. "Another crazy Vorta?" Nodding, Carol proceeded to tell him about the Vorta, who had set himself up as one of the local deities. Deciding he liked the taste of godhood, he had stayed behind when the order to retreat came in, massacring his Jem'Hadar, and living on his own as a lunatic in the woods of Kurotikas for a year, occasionally mutilating a native. Shaking his head, Vance said, "First Luaran, now this. Did we install a wacky Vorta magnet on the ship or something? I wouldn't put it past the engineers to build one." Putting her hand to Vance's cheek, she said, "I really missed you down there. I could have used someone to talk to." "Yeah, well, I don't see us going on a lot of away teams together from here on in after..." He cut himself off. She nodded, understanding. It had been a brutal year for all of them, and the most brutal part was Galvin 6, when Commander Duffy died shortly after proposing to Commander Gomez. I bet that's why Stevens and Corsi have been dancing around each other for months. Well, that and Corsi's an emotional coward, but try saying that to her face. Not wanting to gossip about his CO, not even to his girlfriend, he instead said, "Look, I gotta go prep the troops for the meeting. And I need to have the EMH get rid of these ears." Her hand went to the left one. "They itch like hell. Why don't we try to catch up when I'm off shift? Say, the mess hall, 16-15 hours? She smiled. It was a beautiful smile, and Vance was one of the few who was privileged enough to see it. "It's a date." They both departed the transporter room. Pointer was standing outside the door. "What happened to the calibration?" Vance asked pseudo-innocently. Pointer rolled her eyes. "Yeah, like I need to calibrate things on this ship. Why do you think I requested the transfer here? S.C.E. ships are fine-tuned within an inch of their lives. Easiest duty a transporter chief ever had." Chuckling, Vance gave Carol a quick kiss goodbye, then headed toward the turbolift, while she made a beeline for sickbay. Chapter 4. USS Da Vinci, in transit between Coroticus 3 and Station Kellardus. Now. Renan Konya walked into the security office alongside Mac Vinks. An unfamiliar mind was inside, and when he looked around, he pegged it as the very young human male sitting alone on the port side of the room. He recognized the minds on the starboard side, Timandra's orderly thought patterns, and Andrew Angelopoulos' somewhat more chaotic ones. Renan wasn't a strong enough telepath to detect a non-betazoid's actual thoughts, but he was able to get general impressions, and he certainly knew when he was around people he worked with without ever having to see their faces. "Looks like we're early," he said to the Ioshan. "That must be the new mug. Come on, let's roll out the welcome mat." The new mug was sitting ramrod straight, and he seemed eager to please in the way that only recent recruits could be. Mac walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "You nervous, kid?" Smiling, he said,
"A little, yeah."
"Nothing here to be scared of. You signed yourself up for the best security detail in the quadrant."
"Oh, I already know that, sir."
Renan chuckled. Mac winced. "Can the sir hogwash, kid. Ain't no officers in this room. Except in the commander, of course, but she's a good broad for an officer, so she don't really count." Unable to resist, Renan asked, "Why do I get the feeling you'd never say that to her face?" Grinning, Mac said, "'Cause I ain't got a death wish is why." He offered his hand to the new recruit. "They call me,"
"Mac Vinks,"
he said, returning the handshake.
"and you're Renan Konya. I'm Tomazuka Kim."
Renan frowned. "Funny, you don't look telepathic." Grinning, Kim said,
"I'm not. I just know the crew roster. I followed Commander Corsi's career pretty thoroughly, and I've kept track of the security personnel on the Da Vinci since she reported."
"Why, you got the odds for the commander?" Mac asked with a wink.
"Got the..."
Kim seemed confused at first. That was hardly surprising. Since reporting to the Da Vinci on Earth months ago, Renan had wondered how a non-telepath could possibly understand a single word Mac said, since without his ability to read the Ioshan's perspectives, Renan himself would have found his colleague to be incomprehensible. When Kim finally did get it, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment.
"Oh, nothing like that. God, no, the whole idea's crazy."
"Good thing. She's got the hots for Stevens." Renan gave a half smile. "Well, he has the hots for her anyhow." "Yeah, jury's still out on that one. So what's the story, kid? Why are you going around memorizing Corsi's duty rosters?"
"I'm from Izar. My mother's a peace officer there. A while back, Commander Corsi helped one of our people stop a killer. I was just a kid when it happened. It was 10 years ago."
"You're still a kid, Mac said with a wink.
"But I'll never forget it. She's a big hero on Izar. One of my mother's coworkers, Christine Vale, she quit the force and joined Starfleet."
Mac frowned. "I know that moniker." "Security chief on the Enterprise," Renan said. "Remember Fantastic 61? Realization spread over Mac's face.
"Oh, yeah. Not a bad-looking broad."
That, Renan thought, is a perfect example. How does the word broad come to mean a female?
"Anyhow," Kim said, "when I was old enough, I signed up to join security too, just like Commander Corsi and Lieutenant Vale. I was hoping for the Da Vinci or the Enterprise, but I'd have taken anything. It was just luck that this opening came when it did."
While he appreciated Kim's enthusiasm, that last line hit a bit too close to home. In a quiet voice, Renan said, "I think Ken Caetano might disagree with the notion that luck had anything to do with it." Kim's cheeks flushed again, and Renan couldn't help but feel the young man's embarrassment this time.
"I'm sorry. I didn't mean..."
"Caetano did his job, kid." Mac's voice had hardened. All the friendliness drained from his demeanor, making his eccentric style of speech sound downright scary. Though Renan supposed he was feeling it more strongly, both telepathically in Mac and within himself, too. Ken was good security, and he deserved better than the senseless death he got. Mac continued. "He hadn't been on board for more than a couple of days when he put his keister on the line to save the ship. Turned on one of the engineer's doohickeys. He hadn't done that, we'd all be worm food. And then a couple days later, he died from some weapon made by a Vorta who belonged in a rubber room." "Our job's to protect the people on this ship," Renan added. "That's a duty we all take very seriously." Mac stood up. "It'd be real swell if you got your head out of the clouds and remembered that every once in a while. Otherwise, we'll be burying you next to Caetano. Or worse, we'll be burying the guy you let die because you were too busy drooling over Corsi to do your job right." With that, the Ioshan went over to sit at the starboard side of the security office with Timandra and Andrew. Kim's regret was washing over Renan in waves.
"I didn't mean anything by that, honest.
"I know you didn't," Renan said in as soothing a voice as he could muster. "But you better get used to it. Every new assignment in security usually means you're taking over from someone who died in the line and serving alongside that person's comrades. This ship's had it particularly rough this past year, But with only about 40 people on board, people tend to get close, and the work is very intense. My first couple of weeks here, we explored a city inside a small ball bearing, helped terraform Venus, stopped a Ferengi time traveler, salvaged an alien ship, and went into a black hole. And that was a slow month. Not everyone can handle it. The person Caetano replaced was named Frank Powers, and he transferred off because he couldn't deal with it. Now, the door to the security office opened, and Corsi came in. Still, Renan noted after a moment, with the pointed ears from the Koroticus mission. Elliot Crotein, Madeline Robbins, and Vance Hawkins walked in behind her. Indicating Kim, Vance said, "Commander Corsi, this is Tomozuka Kim, our newest recruit." Kim stood up at attention.
It's an honor, ma'am.
Corsi let out a breath. "At ease, Kim. Why?" Relaxing hardly at all, Kim asked,
Why what, ma'am?
"Why is it an honor?" That seemed to surprise Kim.
Oh, well, the commander probably doesn't remember me, but we've met before. 10 years ago on Izar. My mother is Officer Sun Lee Kim.
If Kim's earlier embarrassment came in waves, Corsi's anger and hostility came like a slap to Renan's face. It happened as soon as Kim mentioned that he was from Izar.
What the hell?
"Sit down, Kim." If only Renan noticed Corsi's fury before she spoke, everyone caught it in her voice now. Baffled, Kim took his seat.
Yes, ma'am.
Corsi then looked out at the rest of them. Here's the drill. The runabout Missouri carrying Doctors Elizabeth Lense and Julian Bashir has gone missing. It hasn't been seen since departing DS9 2 weeks ago. Since the conference they were to attend was to go on for 12 days, no one was the wiser. The Defiant has been dispatched to begin the search, and will be joining them. They're tracking the runabout's path from DS9, will be backtracking from Kel Artis, the station where the conference was held. Everyone's on alert status until we determine what happened to the Missouri and its passengers. Lawak's out for the commission for at least a few days, so we're on beta formation with Kim and Powers, Caetano's spot. Renan blinked. That was the second time since Ken's death that Corsi had done that. Andrew rather stupidly called her on it then. Nobody seemed willing to brave that particular lion in its den now. "Kim, since you're new, the beta form..." the commander started, but Kim interrupted her, proving he had less of a fear of lions.
I know the formation, ma'am.
Renan could feel Kim's pride as he spoke.
It's the same as Alpha, only with you substituting for the injured crew member. In this case, you'll be joining Angelopoulos and Crotein on Gamma Shift, with Chief Hawkins, Tamandra, and Konya on Alpha, and Robbins, Vince, and I on Beta.
Renan was once again impressed with Kim's knowledge of the ship's duty roster. That was a level of preparation most people didn't bother with. Then again, most people don't worship the water their new CEO walks on. Corsi's anger had come back full bore, though Renan was more prepared for it this time. "Two things you need to know, Kim. One is that the duty roster shifts every few weeks, and the one you just recited was changed a week ago after our mission to Artemis 9. And as of right now, the duty roster is changing yet again." That was a surprise, but only a mild one. Changes didn't happen that fast regularly, but that didn't mean they never did. Angelopoulos, Kim, and I will take Alpha, with Lawak slotting back in when he's recovered. Beta is Tamandra, Vince, and Robbins, with Hawkins, Konya, and Crotein on Gamma. That threw Renan for a loop, mostly because he felt the loop that it threw Vance into. Renan knew that Vance had requested Alpha shift the next time the duty roster shifted, so that he and Carol Abramowitz would be on duty at the same time. When Vance had mentioned it to Renan, Andrew, and Mac over dinner one night, he had seemed pretty confident that Corsi would grant it. Since Vance had served with the commander longer than anyone on board save Madeline, Renan assumed it to be a sure thing. So why did she stick him on Gamma? "The second thing you need to know," and now Corsi's anger was starting to make Renan's head hurt, "is that I do not like being interrupted. Is that understood?" In a small voice, Kim said,
Yes, ma'am.
"Say again, Mr. Kim, I didn't hear you," Corsi barked. More loudly, Kim said,
Yes, ma'am.
"Good." She looked out at the rest of the room. "Alpha Shift will report to the security office. Kim, you'll be trained on the systems there. Beta and Gamma report to the Hololab and run battle drills 9 and 10. When Beta Shift starts, Alpha and Gamma will continue to do the same, this time integrating Kim into our maneuvers." She let out a breath. "Bear in mind that we could find Lense and Bashir at any minute, and that may require an extraction. Dismissed." Renan got up. He felt Kim's disappointment in his first meeting with Corsi, which matched Renan's surprise. She hadn't been like this when Renan came on board, which was alongside Mac, Andrew, Tamandra, Sohn, Alec, and the since-departed Frank Powers. And it all had happened when Kim said he was from Izar. Renan was glad that he had been put on the same shift as Vance. This was a concern about the security chief that he needed to bring to the deputy chief's attention post-haste.
To be continued next week. Thank you very much for watching,
You can find me online at DeCandido.net. You can read my blog at decandido.wordpress.com, where you can, among other things, read all about my trip to DragonCon, which is part of why I missed last week. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/KRAD. There's all sorts of cool stuff on there, like TV reviews, movie reviews, vignettes featuring the characters of my original work, as well as excerpts from my works in progress, and lots of cat pictures. Thank you very much for watching. Please, if you haven't, get vaccinated. Please wear your masks when you're out in public, and please, please, please stay safe. Thank you.